This video was brought to you by Squarespace. I really don't know. Right here at the start of the Switch 2 generation, we have two big games releasing very close together: Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza. Mario Kart was a launch game, and while DK technically wasn't, it was a stone's throw away from launch. Close enough that you could argue that it's basically a launch title. Whatever the case though, these were the system's first two really big releases. And these two games feature many similarities. For instance, both games have Donkey Kong in them. Furthermore, both games have Pauline. Okay, well, if you want to speak a little more broadly, both games have a big emphasis on scope, openness, non-linearity, all that. Mario Kart takes the idea of Mario driving a car and blows it up, goes big with it. Instead of separate tracks, they're all tied together in one big world. Free roam lets you drive off the tracks and explore at your own pace. And in stark contrast to the last few decades of DK titles, Bananza takes the Super Mario Odyssey-style sandbox approach. There is a linear order of objectives and levels where you have to do whatever the game asks, but also a tremendous amount of open space to just mess around in, countless little challenges and places to explore off the beaten path. And I would say this game actually has more big open spaces than Odyssey did. So many of these worlds feel really huge. I think all of this, in both cases, is very wise. There's certainly nothing wrong with smaller games, ones with simpler mechanics, smaller scopes, more linear design. But I do think bigger games have an easier time selling. People want to feel like they're getting their money's worth. They want to feel like their console purchases are justified. People simply like grand experiences. Not that Mario Kart needed any help, of course. The series has iterated fairly slowly over the years, and yet sales have only grown. But you know, I really do appreciate that Nintendo made Mario Kart World bigger than it strictly needed to be. They wanted to give the series its Breath of the Wild moment. And then DK, this is just a really great chance for the guy. He's got a real shot in the big leagues, territory previously dominated by Mario and Pokemon. In their own ways, both Mario Kart World and DK Bonanza really feel next-gen, you know? They each make their own case for why someone should pick up a Switch 2. They each represent the grandest experiences yet in their respective series. But while these games are similar in their scope, they do differ dramatically in one category: they're collectibles. And they differ here in a few ways. One is certainly quantity. DK's got more collectibles than a barrel of monkeys. You got the major Banandium gems, Banandium chips that you trade for gems. You got different categories of fossils, which you then trade for outfits. Music tracks for your getaways. The getaways themselves you could probably count as a collectible. And of course, regular old gold, which you constantly find and hoard. And every level is jam-packed with all these collectibles. You can spend hours and hours just hunting them down. And I do. Mario Kart, on the other hand, has P-switches, which offer little challenges, then Peach medallions and question mark panels, which give you stickers. Then I guess there are the basic coins, which unlock cars and characters. You could probably count those. On paper, this seems like a fine number of different things to collect, but in action, they cannot hold a candle to how much DK offers. Unfortunately, quantity is the least of our worries. More collectibles doesn't automatically equal better game, right? The real problem comes down to usefulness. DK's collectibles basically all contribute to something. You find Banandium gems constantly, and every 5 of them grants you a skill point to use in the skill menu. Here you can make yourself stronger, improve your abilities, even unlock new ones. All alone, this makes for an immensely satisfying experience. With every single gem, you get a little further along, a little better. But then the outfits you can buy using fossils, they all do something. They all boost your stats in some way, spawning more treasure chests, increasing mobility in certain conditions, extending Bonanza time, etc. You can even upgrade your outfits, making them even more effective. So again, there's good reason to keep tracking down this stuff. And then, sure, if you have fun smashing stuff, which is very likely, you'll probably get way more gold than you actually need, but it's still fun to buy stuff with it, including maps that lead you to fossils and gems. And I guess you could argue that the music tracks don't really do much, but I mean, that's the cherry on top of everything else. And you get them naturally by beating enemies, so it's still a really fun little bonus. So not only does DK Bananza offer way more stuff to collect, it is almost all really useful, making it that much more satisfying to collect. The collectibles in Mario Kart World, on the other hand, what do? I'll tell you what they do. They do diddly stinking squat. Again, Peach medallions and question mark panels mainly give you stickers. Stickers can be stuck on your cart. And that is it. Then coins gradually unlock new carts and drivers. Okay, you don't use them to purchase these things. I feel like that would have probably made a decent difference, but instead they just kind of unlock as you play. Okay, now, once again, you could argue that collectibles don't necessarily need to do anything. Under the right conditions, it is perfectly acceptable for a player to collect things simply because the process of collecting those things is fun. If the gameplay is good enough, we will usually delight in grabbing a shiny coin, if anything, just to experience the little sparkle and the chime noise, and to vaguely understand that maybe we've made some sort of tiny bit of progress in clearing the game in the process of grabbing it. But in most cases, that little sparkle and chime isn't going to be enough to convince everyone to track down every one of those coins. Ultimately, a collectible needs to sell you on the idea of collecting it. It doesn't necessarily need to convince every single player to collect every single one, but there does need to be some incentive to collect a lot. Fun gameplay itself can help here, as well as the feedback that occurs when you grab a collectible. But another element that can be very, very important is allowing the player to track which collectibles they've already grabbed to make it easier to get more without constantly retreading old ground. This is huge. I am of the opinion, and I'm sure I'm not the only one here, that a collectible needs to fall into at least one of these two categories to really engage the player. It needs to be useful, or it needs to be trackable. It needs to contribute to the gameplay experience in some way, or you need to be able to keep tabs on your collection in case you want to get everything. Once again, DK Bananza excels in this category. It gives you detailed lists of every collectible, categorized by sub-layer, and you can even see their locations after the fact on your map, so you're never left guessing what's left to find. And how does Mario Kart World handle this? Well, you do have a little sticker collection, and you can see which carts and drivers you have so far in the carts and drivers menu. But as for the actual collectibles on the overworld, almost nothing. There's absolutely no way to keep track of which Peach medallions you've grabbed. Even the precious P switches, the best collectible the game's got to offer, they just kind of sit there. There's no way to mark them on your map, no way to see which ones you've done. Bafflingly, the panels are tracked, and only the panels. These are confined to the main tracks, and you can see them on the map screen when you highlight each track. And then there is a little counter in the corner of the map that tells you how many of each collectible you've gotten. So, yeah, I guess this is something. But panels are the easiest to find since they are relatively contained, and there are fewer of them than any of the other collectibles. 150 panels versus 200 Peach medallions and nearly 400 P-switches. And knowing the number you already have of something still isn't really gonna help you figure out which ones you don't have. Furthermore, I would like to mention, even if they're not strictly necessary, there is also something to be said for hint systems. This will vary a bit more between players. Some people feel that hints defeat the purpose of secrets, that secrets are more rewarding to find when discovered naturally. I'll admit, handing out clues can feel a smidge hand-holdy. It can make the process a little too easy depending on how it's handled. Let's look at Metroid, for instance, where the hint system varies between games. Prime 3 3 eventually just fills out your map with pickup locations, which one could argue makes the collection process a bit less interesting. But then Dread shows you the general areas of pickups, so you've got an idea where to look, but you still have to hunt for them. Personally, I do like the feeling of discovering secrets naturally, but I also don't have the patience to comb through every inch of a game world multiple times to vacuum up the last crumbs. So if I'm gonna go for 100% completion or anything close to it, I really appreciate a good hint system. And once again, DK knows what's up. If you want to punch every cubic meter of dirt and find every gem and fossil on your own, you can do that. But you can also spend gold to buy maps, or you can up your treasure chest spawn rate and farm maps that way, and each map will point directly to a gem or fossil on your main map. This can make the collection process really easy, but you can largely avoid picking up too many maps if you try. And for me, this system is the only reason I have been able to bump any of these levels up to that 100% line. It feels like the best of both worlds. I can have a ton of fun hunting manually, and then I can get a little help with the cleanup. Before we continue, a quick reminder that this video was brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace made building my site, Arlo recommends, a breeze. It's all intuitive, there's like no learning curve, everything is easy to input and tweak and change. My site's real simple, so I just draft up my posts, embed text, pictures, videos, links, whatever, schedule it all to post later, and even automatically generate posts for my socials, and I'm done. But you can do just about any kind of site, something personal, something for your business, a storefront, whatever. If you really need some extra juice, Squarespace offers lots of powerful extensions, and I will always shout out the lovely suite of analytics to let you see how your site is doing. To try out Squarespace for yourself, head to squarespace.com for a free trial. Then when you're ready to launch, head to squarespace.com/Arlo to save 10% off your first website or domain. And now for today's recommendation, My Friendly Neighborhood. This highly acclaimed love letter to both kids' puppet shows and classic horror is now available on PlayStation and Xbox, as well as Game Pass. And if you listen closely, you just might hear a familiar voice in there somewhere. Thanks again to Squarespace. Keep doing the thing where you watch the video. Bye. Well, you probably don't need me to tell you that Mario Kart World does not feature any kind of hint system whatsoever. Those panels and coins and switches are just kinda out there. The latter two scattered across this huge landscape. You want to find everything by yourself? You will have to scour every single hidden corner and cove and ledge and nook and cranny. Maybe not so bad. It's fun to be thorough sometimes. But until the little counter on the map screen shows that you've gotten everything, you'll be left constantly guessing how much you have scoured. Can you confidently count any areas as complete? Did you maybe think you combed through this one place over here, but you actually missed this one ledge? Basically, unless you use an online guide and keep meticulous track, you will have to scour every inch of the world, like multiple times probably. The end result of the way Mario Kart World handles its collectibles is that it is hard for me to care about any of them. If they don't do anything, and I don't even know how many I've collected, then there's basically zero incentive for me to really go for them. It's a little fun to grab them when I happen to see them, I guess. P-switch challenges are a nice little diversion all in their own. Like, that's a little bit of gameplay there. But the whole point of a collectible is to collect as many as you can. And since I know there is absolutely no way I am ever gonna get them all, I mean, there's literally no chance, and they don't do anything anyway, I just don't see the point. I'm not gonna go out of my way to find them. I'm certainly not gonna scour the whole map. Okay, yeah, I guess I could go after the panels. Maybe I should put my money where my mouth is and do that. But just the one collectible, and just for the stickers, without even so much as one completion sticker, like just for the flex, even that would have helped a little, but no, not even that. So I simply can't be bothered. And I know I'm not alone. This is a common issue people are having with the game. And in the eyes of those people, this half-hearted approach to collectibles makes Mario Kart World a significantly worse game than it could have been. They provided us with this huge open world, then failed to give us much reason to explore it. However, I don't want to get too far into Mario Kart's overall quality and all the disappointment and all that, because that's really not the point of this video. I'll save that for the full review. I more just want to explore how surprising it is that these two games, very similar in ways and both acting as the Switch 2's big launch titles, could have been made under such wildly different design philosophies. And you know what? I'll even admit it is at least possible that somewhere down the line, Nintendo will update Mario Kart World to fix all of this. And my arguments here will be rendered largely obsolete. I'm a little doubtful, seeing as they've been kind of dragging their feet when it comes to fan feedback, but it is within the realm of possibility. However, to me, right now, it's not about criticizing the game in hopes that someone at Nintendo will listen. I really do just find all this fascinating. Even if they fix the collectible system after this video goes out and it makes Mario Kart World a significantly better game, I think it's still worth examining how Nintendo can treat two major games so differently from a design standpoint. I suppose on the whole, it is reasonable to expect different games to, be different. They're all helmed by different directors and producers, developed by different teams with different strengths and styles. Sometimes I daydream that I run a big company like Nintendo. I mean, of course I do. And I like to imagine applying some philosophies to just about every relevant game. Like, if it's something we can decide is important for enough players, I'd want to try my best to implement that thing at a company-wide level. Nintendo does have some of its own company-wide philosophies, absolutely. They're huge on novelty. New ideas pretty much always get top priority. And in most cases, they're all about polish and feel. They love producing games with a certain level of approachability, the kind of stuff that just about anyone can pick up and immediately have fun with. They very much still treat this business like a toy business. But I always imagine more. I see inconsistencies between projects, and it doesn't sit right with me. I don't know. I'll admit, maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe it is better to let each game be its own thing, let each director and producer see their particular artistic vision realized. Maybe my method would be unintentionally stifling. But there are some categories where it is hard not to feel the way that I feel. There are some ideas and features that can make or break an experience for a huge percentage of the potential audience. Artistic vision is cool and everything. I mean, it's really important. But it is immensely frustrating when Nintendo goes directly against the wishes of its fans, sometimes against the wishes of essentially everyone. When, nearly 100% of the audience can look at some decision and just be like, yeah, that's stupid. We can all agree that Splatoon is a good multiplayer experience because they consistently support it. They provide lots of content. They listen to player feedback. They strive for a good online environment. And Mario sports games, on the other hand, are often lackluster because Nintendo doesn't do any of those things for them. Or why would one game offer the player a whole bunch of options to fine-tune the playing experience, while another barely gives any options at all? Not even basic audio or controller options. Is having options important, or is it not? This goes a little beyond artistic decision-making. I don't want to start going down the laundry list of all the ways Nintendo disappoints us. But you get what I'm talking about. If something is important to the broader audience, if it's something that will greatly improve the experience for a lot of people, it should be considered. That's what I mean when I talk about company-wide policies. In many cases, if something is important for one game, it should probably be important for just about every game. And as with basically everything, Nintendo games are all over the place when it comes to collectibles. And really, this is a pretty huge topic. I'm sure you could really dive deep into the whole history of Nintendo collectibles and all the competing philosophies. I'm not gonna do that today, but we can at least briefly poke around the museum. For starters, you really can't bring up DK and collectibles in the same sentence without then reminiscing about DK64. That game is infamous for how it handled collectibles. I mean, that's really its whole thing. It's legacy. Basically, it had way too many of them. Just loads and loads of different things to find, and then some that you could only grab as certain characters, so getting everything was a huge chore. Some people believe that DK64 was actually responsible for putting the 3D platformer genre on ice. That's probably an oversimplification, but it does seem likely that it gave the Collectathon genre its name. And back then, being called a Collectathon was not meant as a compliment. And you know, I do think it's possible that how DK Bananza handles its collectibles is at least partially a direct response to the whole 64 thing. A way to make amends, in a sense. But for some more modern examples, let's look at another pair of similar Year 1 games. Super Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild are both stuffed with collectibles, but they each handle them a little differently. Instead of the classic 120 stars, Odyssey has 880 moons, plus you can buy more. I think blowing up the number of the primary collectibles and hiding them all over the place was smart, but you know, of course, lots of people think this made the experience feel a little too watered down. So that right there is a great example of it really just coming down to the individual player. Sometimes it is a design decision that some people will like and some people won't like. Then some people would argue that having so many moons makes it just like too hard to 100% the game, and Nintendo is maybe even de-emphasizing the necessity to do that. But then the game also lets you track your moons and offers a pretty good hint system, so I would argue that it's pretty fun to 100%, despite the huge number. Maybe a little tedious, but it's doable. And then there are also purple coins, which are used to buy costumes. These don't do anything like the ones in DK Bananza, but they're so funny looking, they're still really fun to collect. And then over to Breath of the Wild, I think it handled things really well. It's fun to find all the shrines, it's fun to do all the shrines, it's easy enough to track them once you've found them and done them, and every single one grants a spirit orb, which can be traded for hearts or stamina. Super useful, always worth collecting. But do those even necessarily count as collectibles? Well, much more traditional would be Koroks. They're scattered all over the map, just waiting for you to find them, much more like traditional pickups in other games. And I really, really love how you can see the philosophy behind Koroks built right into the game. Korok seeds let you buy extra item slots, so they're incredibly useful, even vital. But then the world is so big and there are so many to find that the designers didn't want people to feel obligated to get them all, to feel like they were missing out if they didn't. So Nintendo purposefully neglected to let you track them, and the reward for getting them all is literally a piece of poop. Because it's the journey, not the destination, right? The prize at the end isn't the point at all. I think this is a fascinating insight into the design process. Sometimes, oftentimes, it's best to give players options so that they can play however they want. But other times, you really do have to try and subtly influence what they want. One could certainly argue that it was wrong to not let players track Koroks. And yet, in this particular case, I can kinda see where they were coming from. A Korok list would have definitely given me a feeling of FOMO, this nagging little voice telling me I should try to fill it out more. This was a real artistic design choice that had a real impact on the game. Sometimes even very small differences in how collectibles are handled can lead to very different experiences. Another more modern example, Luigi's Mansion 3 makes it deliciously fun to hunt for money. Just finding it and having it spew all over the place and vacuuming it all up, all the physics and all the destroyed objects and stuff is just amazing. I really, really enjoyed sucking up every single cent from every single corner of every single room. Until I reached the end of the game and realized that there was barely anything to do with the money, and it was mostly just used to decide my final score. This realization, in a way, retroactively made the experience just a smidge less enjoyable. Getting money is simply fun to do, sure, but in future playthroughs, I probably won't be as thorough. I mean, even just being able to buy a handful of collectibles, like in Luigi's Mansion 2, I feel like that would have made a really, really big difference. Just something. But as it is, I don't want to engage in that activity as much as I used to. it's kind of funny, wanting to want to collect something more than you do. It really is a nuanced topic. Every game is different. Every designer is different. Sometimes you have to try and guide the player's wants. You know, fostering motivation is a very important yet relatively invisible part of game design. But sometimes an attempt to sway the player one way or another can backfire, and suddenly you've got a game or an element of a game that too many people just don't like. When can we say that a choice is correct? Does it just come down to exactly how many people like it or don't like it? Is there like an equilibrium you've got to try and achieve? You can argue that the customer is always right, but you can also argue that the customer doesn't always know what they want. And Nintendo is famous for giving the customer things they didn't even know they wanted. In the case of collectibles, again, you're talking about something that can potentially make or break an experience. And in the case of Mario Kart World, I think the general consensus is that this is a very fun game in its own ways, but when it comes to the open world and its collectibles, this experience unfortunately falls under the broken category. If I had to guess, I would say this was probably one of those cases of project leads having a vision for their game that just doesn't line up with the desires of most of the audience. Usually when Nintendo populates a game with collectibles or challenges that don't really accomplish anything mechanically, it's because they're trying to encourage intrinsic motivation. They want people to engage with their games simply because it is fun to do so, not because they feel compelled. Insert long, repetitive rant about the lack of combat incentives in modern Paper Mario titles. With Mario Kart, it's possible that they wanted the exploration, the freedom, the lack of limitations to be its own incentive. They wanted the collectibles to just be a fun little thing to do, but not the whole point. The point is to drive. But Breath of the Wild discouraged collecting every Korok because there were already plenty of things to do in that game. Super Mario Odyssey only required the player to collect a small fraction of its moons to roll the credits, because they knew people would naturally want to engage with all these hundreds of different challenges. Run and jump Mario challenges is the whole game, but driving around in Mario Kart World is simply not enough by itself. Racing is fun, there's a real point there. But even if you've got friends to mess around and free roam with, there just isn't anything to do. Just driving gets old pretty fast. It's a fun way to chill out and pass 10 or 15 minutes, but it's not playing a game. If the designers felt that this would be enough, and they purposefully de-emphasized collectibles, they made a grave error. They turned Mario Kart into an open-world game without understanding what an open-world game is supposed to be. Objectivity isn't really real as much as we like to think it might be. All we've got is our own opinions, and the designers at Nintendo are just guessing their way along like anyone else. But it is hard not to see this open-world experiment as something of a flub, at least in its current state, where the collectibles are just not worth going after. And like, this isn't just any old game, right? This isn't another Paper Mario game we can argue about for a bit and then forget. This is Mario Kart. Judging by the performance of 8 Deluxe, this may be the single most important game the Switch 2 will ever get. Talk about artistic integrity all you want, but sometimes it really does just come down to business. At the end of the day, if you're a huge company catering to a huge audience, you gotta keep your eye on the prize, right? You've got to please that audience if you want them to buy your product by the tens of millions. Again, maybe it won't matter too much for Mario Kart. Maybe it'll still sell 1 trillion copies in the long run. And you know what? For all I know, they are gonna listen to player feedback, and they're gonna patch in some sort of collectibles list and even like a hint system and all that. That is absolutely a possibility, and it would absolutely help a ton. But that's why, again, the point of this video is not to point out Mario Kart World's flaws. I'll be a lot less bummed if they do fix it down the line, but at least right now, it's just strange seeing the game right next to DK Bananza. 2 similar games, yet wildly different experiences, thanks to wildly different design philosophies. And the reception to each, at least when it comes to the whole collectible angle, has been, suffice it to say, wildly different. Well, that's all I've got for you today. Before we go, I would like to give a shout out to Kane, who edited this video and inspired it with this totally innocent, yet still somehow completely incendiary social media post. Yep, welcome to the world of Nintendo discourse, buddy. Also, thank you for watching. If you've been playing either of these two games, I would love to hear what you...